Hello everybody, welcome to the I Am IT Geek YouTube channel. My name is Shabazz Dan. In case you have forgotten, which I'm sure you've not, I am the IT Geek. Welcome back to another episode in my Microsoft Entra Deep Dive series. So we've been releasing 3 videos a week for the last, I'd say, month almost. We're deep into the series. Over halfway, I'd say. It's not going to be as long as a series as my sort of study guide stuff, because they're just marathons are huge. Obviously, a lot of content to cover in the exams, but we're still going to be just over halfway, I'd say. So still a lot of ground to cover. We have covered loads. So let's move straight into the presentation and get on with this episode. So here we are, and as I mentioned, we are. This is the Microsoft Entra Deep Dive series. Do a bit of a recap what we spoke about in the last episode. So we started the identity governance topic, which was just part 1 of a 2-parter, and there's entitlement management, which we discussed, and we kind of explained what entitlement management was and how it automates that sort of access review process and those lifecycle workflows of identities and access. And then we talked about access reviews, and each one I kind of showed how you can create access reviews. I showed how you can configure entitlement management in the portal. So in today's episode, we are going to finish off the identity governance piece. And I think I mentioned in the last episode that the identity governance is probably one of my favorite parts of Azure AD and sort of Microsoft Cloud. And PIM is got to be the one that stands out for me, the RBAC and privileged identity management. So looking forward to covering that first up. And then we're going to move on to lifecycle workflows and explain a little bit about those. That's quite it's in preview at the moment. So so let's get straight started with privileged identity management. So we're going to jump into the portal in a second. However, I've not done a diagram for a while. It's getting a bit itchy. So I want to kind of explain. There's 2 aspects to privileged identity management and sort of role-based access control. And what we'll try and do is explain that in a diagram. So this is kind of a standard diagram from like a PIM perspective. So what we have is at the top, as you can see, we have the sort of the Azure AD roles. So there, like global administrator, user administrator, billing administrator, Intune administrator, for example. So there's a whole load of roles. We are going to look at some of those in this part. And those are what we call Azure AD roles. So they're kind of roles that manage Azure AD, that tenancy, and access to SaaS applications and your sort of SaaS element. And then we have, again, sort of the root access, which is normally global admin or user access in the middle there. And obviously user access, admin is the sort of elevated access. But then we start to that integrates then with Azure roles, and their access that governs access to your PaaS and IaaS services. So whereas Azure AD roles are more SaaS services, and they govern and grant access, control access to the sort of SaaS element of Microsoft 365 and Azure. With Azure roles, so again, notice the difference between Azure AD roles and Azure roles. There we have like owner, contributor, reader, user access admin. And then again, the way the hierarchy works within the IaaS and PaaS area is sort of the management. You have a management group structure. So you have your root group, management group, which is your top level. So you make sure you grant sort of more than reader access to that level. And then you have sort of your management groups, and then within those you could have multiple subscriptions like we have. So a bit like global admin is access to everything within Azure AD roles. Owner is essentially access to everything, depending on what level you give that access. With global admin, once you give that, they have access to anything. Once you give user administrator access, that they can complete certain tasks within the Azure AD. Same with billing admin, they can complete all those sort of administrative tasks within billing. So these are specific areas within Microsoft 365 you can give access to. But with owner, that makes them the owner of the entire tenant. Doesn't matter which. And again, depending on if you've given, say, owner of the whole root management group, everything below that hierarchy, all the management groups, all the subscriptions, that user is the owner of, and they can manage them all and delete, add, etc. So it's quite bad practice to give owner level at this top. I'd never recommend giving someone owner of that top root level. I might recommend, again, historically, we tend to give reader access at that level. sort of your top level admins who need to be able to at least see that. And then that's where you kind of then start giving more increased access to the management group level, and obviously even more increased access at the subscription level. Again, it depends what your requirement is, at what sort of sensitivity level or what sort of security level you're kind of working at. My experience with government, especially doing a lot of government work, is you tend to be a lot more strict with access. Then we have, again, the classic subscription admin roles as well. So within sort of the Azure roles as well. So you can grant access to specific resource groups, specific resources as well. And at the side here, we have that sort of admin account tenant, and that's kind of more from the sort of the account itself, not the tenant. So the account may have multiple tenancies. And that's where we have an Azure account as well. That's connected to that subscription. So hopefully that gives you an idea of some of the differences between Azure AD roles and Azure roles. To get started, let's jump into the portal and take a look at PIM. Welcome back. Here we are back in the Microsoft Entra Admin Center. We're back in Azure AD, and we're down here in Identity Governance. So we've already looked at entitlement management and access reviews. Let's click on PIM, or Privileged Identity Management. And here we have sort of the quick start, and this is again the getting started part. Big fan of these. You know, you can read up on sort of the manage access, activate just in time. We're going to discuss what that is in a second. You know, discover and monitor. Look at common. Okay, it's common for access to critical resources to go undetected, so you can start to discover those. So a really good little dashboard. And I think it's good for you to start off on here if you're new to privileged identity management. Let's look at what's new as well, so you can read up on what features are new. So if we start going down, so as a user, you'll be able to access privileged identity management, you know, and you can request enhance, especially if you're an administrator, existing administrator already. You know, you can click on roles and see what roles, if any, have been granted. So what we have here, we have eligible assignment and active assignments. Obviously, expired assignments are kind of self-explanatory, but now eligible assignments are essentially access that you are eligible for. So you don't have it, but you need to activate it. So again, that could be something that another administrator has given, like, you know, the global administrator maybe has given you an eligible assignment because they know that from time to time you need this role. So you could have a whole list of stuff here. Now, my own opinion, again, how I've done this historically, I tend to use eligible assignments more. Very rare do I use active assignments. Active assignments, I say that and I've given myself a global admin, but this is my demo tenant, so I'm allowed. But active assignments are essentially privileges and roles that a user has all the time. They have been granted that, and that's it. It's active all the time, and they've been assigned it. It is not. I don't believe it's best practice to do this, if I'm honest with you. The only active assignment you should really have, I suppose, is okay. So some part of your service desk, they create accounts all the time. They're doing their day-to-day job requires them to have this role. Then give them maybe user administrator or a role, maybe a custom role that is active and they're doing it all the time. But eligible assignments, if they're maybe managing teams from time to time, give them an eligible assignment to like Teams administrator, which is maybe only active for maybe 4 hours. They can activate that, give the reason they need to. So again, for this, I could click on activate, but then I need to specify, so at a global level, I've set no more than 8 hours can they have access, so no one, just one day. But then they need to give a reason, okay? And that'll then go off for approval. You can click on activate, that'll go for approval and get accepted or denied. And again, there are settings we can set at that top level, and we'll go through that in a second. So that's the difference between eligible and active. Active assignments are what you've been granted and assigned, full stop, directly. Eligible are ones you are eligible to have access to, but they need activating. Same with groups. You can give obviously group eligible assignments and active assignments. So those are Azure AD roles. These are Azure resources. We mentioned the difference between the two. Azure AD roles are more kind of Azure AD, Microsoft 365, whereas Azure resources are more the IaaS and PaaS services within an Azure subscription. Just going back to privileged identity management, like I said, you can click on, so those are my roles. You can look at your request there as well. And again, what requests you've made, similar to what we saw before on my roles. You get an approval request. If you're an approver, are there any Azure AD roles, any groups, any Azure resources that are waiting for your approval? And again, same with review access as well. You can look at review access, and are there access reviews that are waiting for your approval on either Azure AD roles or Azure resources? And here we can sort of manage Azure AD roles here. But this is where, as I mentioned, on the settings, you can put the global settings. So you can, these are all the sort of roles that are accessible. And as we go back, you can do the same with Azure resources. Look at all the sort of roles there, Azure resource roles, and you can essentially you need to well, let's do this. I've not done this before, so you need to discover resources. So which you can choose a subscription. If you have multiple subscriptions, I'm going to choose my IMIT Geek one. I click on Manage Resource. So PIM will manage all child objects for the selected resources, and we want to confirm, yeah. And I'll be able to see all my resources and grant access to those once that's confirmed. Let's go back to Azure Resources. We can see the IMIT Geek one there. Click on here. I can then control the roles and assignments and access reviews to my Azure Resources on that subscription. Okay. So this is again where we kind of control who has access to what. And again, I want to talk about just in time, so we can activate this. And again, just in time access again is limiting the amount of time a user has access to a certain role and enhanced privileges. So you could set it so they can only do it for, say, you can only, so if we click on, like I said, Azure Resources, we don't have any, but that there. You can activate that for a limited amount of time. So the maximum allowed is 8 hours. Well, they could put that down to 2 hours if they needed. Okay. So just in time is more about minimizing the amount of time a user has access. Okay. And again, as we go down, just the more activity, you can see the audit history for Azure AD roles and access Azure roles, Azure resource roles, and then troubleshoot and support as well. So let's jump back into the presentation and see what the next topic is. Welcome back, everybody. Before we move on to that next topic and the final topic within the privileged identity management topic, I want to just go over just in a bit more detail around the differences between Azure AD roles and Azure resource roles. And this is one thing I feel people get confused around quite a bit, especially if they're new to sort of payment identity management and RBAC roles. So on the left-hand side, we've got sort of the bullet points around Azure AD roles. On the right-hand side, we've got the Azure resource roles. So let's stick on the left-hand side. With Azure AD roles, as I mentioned, you manage access to Azure AD resources. Now, they're normally your SaaS applications, enterprise applications, registered applications, Exchange, Teams, SharePoint, OneDrive, that sort of stuff, okay? With Azure AD roles, you can do custom role support. So it does support custom roles. So you can create a custom role if you need not quite, say they manage certain aspects of Teams. They might not need all those attributes, all access, but maybe meeting rooms. So you can create custom roles. It's a more specific scope. So again, if you give user administrative access, if it's just that already ready-made role, then they have a set of permissions already set, and it's access to everything within that. So again, like a user administrator would be able to do everything within Azure AD, create groups, create users. There's no different levels. It's just one level, like tenant level. And again, you can manage this through Azure AD Portal, 365 Admin Center, Microsoft Graph, Azure AD PowerShell as well. Now, if we look at some of the nuances and differences with Azure resource roles, these manage access to Azure resources. Now, that's the PaaS and IaaS element. So, we're talking SQL, Azure SQL, we're talking Azure Active, Azure Domain, Azure Virtual Desktop, get me tongue twister out, virtual machines, storage, all that sort of stuff, Kubernetes, containers and clusters, etc. Now, again, this is custom roles, so you can do custom roles. And what I find best practice, again, is to create security groups that you can assign up. And again, you notice if you go back to the security group or the groups video that I did, there was that where you can enable to assign privileged groups to security groups. That's how I always do it. I always create a security group, I'll enable it so I can assign a role, and then I will assign a role to whatever level to the group rather than individual person. Easy to manage. And there are multiple levels of scope. So if you remember just back to the diagram that I did earlier, there was management root group, management group, and then subscriptions within underneath that, then resource group, resources within that. So you can assign permissions at all those different levels, whereas Azure AD roles, it's just one level sort of thing. It's more specific scope. And again, we can manage Azure resource roles through Azure Portal, Azure CLI, PowerShell, ARM, and REST API. So you can't do it through the admin center. Because again, Microsoft 365 Admin Center is more sort of SaaS elements. So let's see, what is the next topic? I believe it should be Lifecycle Workflows. So let's jump straight back into the portal and take a look. Welcome back, everybody. So before we get started with this, you can see I've got the Lifecycle Workflows part of the portal in my screen. But just for those that are aware, this is in preview at the moment. So Lifecycle Workflows are sort of a new identity governance feature, and it enables your business or organization to manage Azure AD users by automating sort of 3 basic lifecycle processes, if you think about it. So we've got a joiner, so that's someone who's new to the business. And they need access. It could be a new employee joining a company normally, organization, or joining a new team. We've got the mover. So this is when an individual moves between boundaries. So they might go from marketing to finance or whatever, or HR to finance. So that this movement normally requires more access or authorization. And again, examples like say someone moved from marketing to HR or something like that. And then finally, we have the leaver. So we've had the join already. We have the leaver. So this is when an individual leaves a scope of needing that sort of access. So again, it might be the organization, or it might be the kind of moving from a team, or the retiring or whatever. So those are 3 sort of basic lifecycle areas. And again, if we look in the portal, this allows us to match. This is all preview notes. This might change when it goes full public. So we have obviously the overview here. And again, this lets us look at the sort of any workflows that's scheduled. So every 3 hours I've got there, scheduled enabled, scheduled disabled. What deleted workflows do we have? We can actually create a workflow from here, or we can create a workflow from the overview page. If we go to workflow here, let's just click on create one here. So again, we've got the workflows here. So we've got the lever, the different sort of choose a onboard pre-hired employees, onboard new hire employees, the lever, real-time employee termination, pre-offboarding, so someone maybe handed the notice in, offboarding employee, post-offboarding. So we create any one of these. So we just click kind of like select that one there, the pre-onboarding one, so pre-hire one. And it's kind of got all the details in there for us. We can either leave this at default, or we can sort of change the sort of trigger details. So this is the day, so 7 days from the event, it'll start to trigger that event. Configuring scope, again, we can add any sort of, so we can add the different rules here. So this one, so let's say we've got an expression. So these are sort of the expressions, the sort of, look at the rule syntax as well. So this defines the conditions used to determine the user scope for executing the workflow. So you can put in your various rules here. And obviously here we can sort of review and create. So this is just, again, this very much depends on what your sort of organizational policies around this, and you can create separate workflows. Obviously, let's just look at deleted workflows if anyone's been deleted, or any workflows have been deleted. We're going to manage the custom extensions now. I believe we are going to be looking at custom extensions somewhere. We might have already looked at that's custom authorization. Anyway, we can add a custom extension here if we need. So custom extension can be used to expand your lifecycle workflows, and this uses an Azure Logic app. So look at launch and continue. This is the sort of condition, the workflow task behavior. It shows us the details. Go down to the resource group and we need to put the Logic app name in here. And then we've got the workflow settings. So these are settings for the whole sort of tenant for workflow. So you can schedule. So notice it was every 3 hours. We could change this if we needed to. We can enter the domain. So we can I'm IT Geek one there. You want to choose your default domain. We can use company branding as well if we want. So that's a bit of an overview of sort of lifecycle workflow and what that's used for. Again, that is now the PIM, the privileged identity management topic, done with. I hope that was informative. I hope everyone's enjoyed it. I believe next we are going to be moving on to external identity, so that should be quite fun. Quite an important topic as well. Thank you everybody for your ongoing support. I hope you're enjoying the series. Put the links to the topics that I've covered today in the description, as well as my socials if you want to follow me or ping me a message. Please continue to like, comment, and do not forget to subscribe. So thank you for watching. Until next time, goodbye.